Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be in the Harvest Remedy kitchen and we're going to be prepping some weekly staples, kitchen staples. So today I'm going to be preparing some yogurt, some mayo, some tomato sauce, some chicken broth. I'm also making some seed crackers and I'm preparing some vegetables, some beetroot from our garden for some dip, and also going to be making a custard base for some ice cream for the week. So we're starting today off by getting our yogurt started, and I have a yogurt maker which keeps the temperature. However, you don't need to have a yogurt maker. If you don't have one, that's fine. You can just keep it in the oven overnight with just the light on, and that's enough residual heat to ferment it enough and keep it at the temperature. You can also put it in an esky and wrap it in some towels. That's not a problem. So if you don't have a yogurt maker, don't worry, but if you do have one, that's great too. I'll show you how I'm going to prepare mine today with my yogurt maker. So I've got a 2-litre glass jar. Now I've run this through the dishwasher so that it's sterilised. Really important to have everything run through the dishwasher or boiling water, just to make sure that when you are culturing your milk for your yogurt, that you're growing the good bacteria and not bad bacteria. So what we're going to start with for our yogurt is I'm going to heat my milk up in the Thermomix. So I'm just using a full cream milk. It's store-bought. Ideally, I would like to use raw milk. However, it's illegal to sell and purchase raw milk in our state. So I'm just using the pasteurized milk from the supermarket, which is absolutely fine. So I'm going to add it to my Thermomix, but you could do this on the stove top. It just has to maintain a temperature of around, and we're going to bring mine up to about 85, 90 degrees. And I'm going to keep it at that temperature for about 20 to 30 minutes. I'll post a link as well in the description of the recipe, just so if you want to make it at home, you can. So the reason that you want to heat your milk for 20 to 30 minutes is the longer that you heat it for, the thicker the yogurt is, because what you're doing is you're denaturing the proteins in the milk, and that gives you a really nice thick consistency. And so the longer you heat it, you can heat it for 10 minutes if you like, it just won't be as thick, and that's fine too. I like a really thick creamy yogurt, so I'm going to heat mine for about 20-30 minutes, probably 25. And I'm just going to put about 1.5 litres in there because that's the capacity of my yogurt container. And so, as I said, you could do it on the stove top if you like and just keep an eye on the temperature. Okay, so I've set that for 25 minutes at 85 degrees and just at stir speed. And then while that's going and while we're waiting for our milk to heat up, I'm going to start on some chicken broth. So to make my chicken broth, I just use some chicken frames that I buy in bulk from my local butcher. And these ones are fresh. However, I do have some in the freezer as well. So you can make these with frozen or fresh. Frozen, obviously, it will take a little bit longer. And I'm just going to chop up some carrots and some onions. You could simply make your broth just with chicken and water and no seasoning if you just want a really plain chicken broth, and then add the seasoning in later when you cook your meals. I like to boost the flavour, so what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to roast the onions and the carrots and the chicken frames to get a really, really beautiful rich flavour to my chicken stock or chicken broth. And what I'm going to do is just roughly cut the veggies. And you can also just use scraps. So if you have carrot tops, it's one thing that I like to do when I remember, I don't always remember, is keep carrot tops and also keep the onion ends and skins and just pop them in the freezer. And then when I'm making some broth, I can just pull the bag out, throw it in the pan with the chicken, and then you're basically using scraps. So it's a really cheap and economical way of making some chicken broth. So for the onions, I'm literally just quartering those, so it's super quick and easy. And that's the veggies prepped. And then next we're going to throw all this in the roasting tray. Hopefully this is going to fit. I'm just going to put my board aside as I've got a board dirty, a knife dirty, so we can just reuse that for the other things that we're prepping today. That's another thing why I like doing these preps, is that it saves on dishes. And then I'm also making a beetroot dip today. So I've got beetroots from our garden, and I'm just gonna, the recipe wanted 2 large beetroots. I have 4 little beetroots, so I'm just going to wrap those in foil, and while I've got the oven going, I'm just going to stick them on top of the chicken here and roast them up at the same time. So I've just got the oven, I've preheated it on 200, and I'm just going to pop this in the oven for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. I'll probably check the beetroots at about 1 hour because they're already small. And in they go. Oh, that's not going to fit. I'm just going to change the shell. Take that out. So while my milk heats up and I let my appliance do its thing for me, and my chicken and veggies for the broth are roasting, and I've got my beetroots roasting for my dip, I'm going to start on a quick pickle. So I'm just making a red onion quick pickle. So to start this, I have just a glass preserving container, and I've just washed that in the dishwasher just to clean it, give it a really good clean. Just going to get going in a small saucepan. I've got 1 cup of water in there, and I've just used filtered water from my filter. And I'm also going to add 1 cup of apple cider vinegar to that. I'm just going to add some honey to that brine as well as my sweetener, just while it's on the stovetop so that it can dissolve well. You can also add sugar or any other sweetener that you like, stevia, coconut sugar, maple syrup. What does the preserving here for this quick pickle is the vinegar. So sweeten it to taste. So I'm just going to add in about a tablespoon of honey and just give it a stir to dissolve. And then we just wait for that vinegar, water and honey solution to come to a boil. And then the next thing you want to do is just slice your onion, or if you're using carrot, you could make a quick pickle carrot as well, which is beautiful. And then these skins, I'm actually going to save and pop them in the freezer and use them next time I make a broth. If you haven't tried quick pickles, 1, they're super quick and easy to prep for the week ahead, and they taste amazing. You can have them with salads, just as a side, for any addition to your meals, really. Great in sandwiches, and also really nice just by themselves. You can customize the pickle as well, just by adding, you can add a few cloves of garlic if you like, you can add some pepper, you can add any herbs or spices that you like as well. And then all I'm going to do is fill my jar with the onion. And then this is when, if you're wanting to add any other herbs or spices, you add it at this stage. I actually like my quick pickle just plain without any herbs or spices. So I'm just going to add onion into this jar. So our vinegar, water and honey solution is ready. And then I'm just going to pour it over the onion. And you want to essentially cover the onion. And then I'm going to pop the lid on that. So that's the quick pickle done. I'm just going to let it cool a little bit and then I'm going to place it in the fridge. So it will keep in the fridge. We keep it for a good couple of weeks because it does have a high vinegar content. So that's our milk ready, 25 minutes done. Let's get on to making the rest of the yogurt. So the next thing you need to do after your milk has heated at 85 for 25-ish minutes is just let it cool down. So it needs to cool right back down to say 39 degrees Celsius. And then you can add the culture. If you add the culture or a yogurt before then, you will kill your culture or yogurt. It will be too hot. So today, I'm just using a cup and a half of yogurt from my last yogurt batch. You could also just buy a yogurt from the supermarket as your culture, as long as it is just milk and live cultures. Really important that you get live cultures and nothing else added. No gums, no thickeners, no sugar, nothing else. So I have used a Greek yogurt with just milk and live cultures in it. That's what I initially started my yogurt culture from. You can also purchase cultures, powdered cultures as well, that you can add in. So now we just need to let that wait until that's come down in temperature. So what I'm going to do, because I want to use the Thermomix for heating up my custard base and finishing that, I'm just going to pour this heated milk straight into the yogurt container and then leave that to cool. So the next thing I'm going to get started on is my custard for my ice cream. So I'll have the recipe linked in the description below. I'm doing 1.5 times the recipe and it's just a basic vanilla ice cream recipe. I'm doing it in the Thermomix, but you can also do it on the stovetop. The recipe is actually written for the stovetop, so you will be able to follow that quite easily. And I'm just using the Thermomix as I have it, and I don't have to stand there and stir the whole time, so it just makes it a bit easier. So what I'm going to add is 6 eggs. I'll just get my chicken bowl. So what I do with the egg whites is just freeze those until I want to use them, say for a meringue or a pavlova. So I always like to check out eggs before I use them, especially when making something like this where you're using quite a few eggs. However, I'm pretty confident that they're fine as we don't have a rooster and these are from yesterday and today. So they're pretty fresh, fresher than anything you're gonna get from the supermarket anyway. So that's our 6 egg yolks done. So I'll put that white aside and I can freeze that for later. And then the next thing that I add to this is 1.5 cups of cream. And as I said, I am doing 1.5 times the recipe, as that's the maximum capacity that my ice cream maker holds. However, if you've got a bigger ice cream maker, go ahead and add more. I also need to add 1.5 cups of milk. And again, I'm just using a full cream milk. But if you have your own milk from your own cows, then even better. And I try not to use refined sugar, white sugar if I can. So instead of white sugar, I'm just adding some maple syrup. So I'm adding 3/4 of a cup of maple syrup. And I'm adding some vanilla powder. And when you're using vanilla powder, you don't need as much as you would an essence. So I'm using just 1/8 of a teaspoon. Sorry, 1/4 of a teaspoon instead of 1/2 teaspoon. And I'm also adding a pinch of salt, as the salt helps to bring out the vanilla flavour. And then I'm just going to mix that up just to blend it all together. So you're just wanting to break up those egg yolks. So then we have a beautiful yellow creamy custard base here. And I'm not leaving this as vanilla. I'm actually adding some mint leaves from my garden and making it a mint ice cream. So I've just picked some fresh mint and I'm just going to add it in, and I've just washed it and dried it. And then in the Thermomix, I just put this on the thicken mode. You just want to keep it at 80, you don't want to boil it. You want to bring the custard base up to the 80 degrees and hold it there, stirring constantly. So the Thermomix essentially keeps the custard base at 80 for me and constantly stirs it. And it'll let me know when that's thickened, which is approximately 10 minutes. So my Thermomix has just finished thickening the custard base. So now we'll strain that and get that into the fridge to cool overnight, ready to make the ice cream tomorrow. I wish you could smell this peppermint ice cream. It smells delicious. And you just want to place some either plastic wrap, or I have a sugarcane biodegradable wrap, just over the top of the custard base, just to stop it forming that hard skin. So now I'm going to move on to making some mayonnaise, which, if you haven't tried homemade mayonnaise, is so easy to make and it's so good for you. It hasn't got all those additives in it, just really beautiful fresh ingredients, and it tastes amazing, and you can adjust it to your taste as well and your palate. So again, I'm using the Thermomix. However, you can just use a food processor. You could also use a hand stick immersion blender, but it does depend on the quality of your blender whether it will actually work. I have a cheaper hand stick blender and it doesn't actually work for me. So I would suggest you can try it. You can try it with your immersion blender, or you can just do it with a food processor. Or I've also done mayonnaise just by hand and whisking. You get a really, really good workout. So the first thing that we need for this is 1 egg yolk. So I've just got a little bowl here just to put the egg whites in. The next thing I'm going to add is some mustard, and I just add like a really generous teaspoon. I'm probably going to put 2 in because I love the flavour the mustard gives the mayo. And about half a teaspoon of salt. But again, you can adjust it to taste. Now you don't need to add a sweetener to mayonnaise, but I like to add a little bit of honey or stevia. So I'm just going to add a teaspoon. And the mustard is really important in the mayonnaise. It really helps to emulsify the mix. And I'm going to add about a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. And also some lemon, just half a lemon, about a teaspoon you want. And then I'm just going to give that a bit of a mix in my food processor Thermomix, or you could just whisk it up to mix it up. So if you're using a food processor, I would just press the turbo button maybe 2 or 3 times, and that should be enough. You just want to blend up those egg yolks. And now all we need to do is turn the food processor on and then add 1 cup of oil. I'm using an avocado oil, or sometimes I'll use macadamia nut oil or olive oil, whatever your preference is. Avocado oil is great. It's got fantastic health benefits, and it also has a really mild flavor. So I'm just going to add my whisk attachment into my food processor Thermomix, pop the lid on, and then set it for about 5 minutes, speed 3. And then I'm just going to very slowly at first drizzling this oil, and then over about 2 to 3 minutes you can gradually start to increase the speed of your pouring. And pour the rest of that oil in. Okay, so now I've just added that mayonnaise that we just made into a container, a jar. You could put it in any container or jar that you like. And I'm going to pop that in the fridge. Now you will find it is a little bit thinner to start with, and then once it's in the fridge for a while, it will actually firm up. And that's the mayonnaise done. Okay, so I've just cleaned my Thermomix, just given it a really thorough rinse in the sink, because next we're going to make the homemade tomato sauce or tomato ketchup. So I'm making this in the Thermomix, but again, you could start this process in a food processor and then cook it on the stove top and then return it to your food processor or blender to blend up. So the first thing I'm adding to the Thermomix is 2 onions, and I will link this recipe in the description if you'd like to use it. This is fantastic. Everyone loves this in my family, and I don't can this, water bath can. I just make it in small batches and keep 1 in the fridge and 1 in the freezer, and it freezes really well. Now I love garlic, so I'm actually going to add this whole clove of garlic. So I've got the onion and garlic in my food processor. The next thing I'm going to add are the tomatoes. So I'm putting about 800 grams of tomatoes in. Just going to chop off those bad spots. And I'm just quartering the tomatoes, just chopping them into chunks. Okay, so now we've finished chopping up our onions, garlic and tomato. We'll just blitz that in the food processor. So I'm going to process the veggies for the tomato sauce just for about 10 seconds on a medium to high speed. And so you're looking for a very finely chopped mix like that. Now I'm just going to add the rest of the ingredients in, and then we're going to cook it for 30 minutes. So I'm going to add a couple of tablespoons of olive oil. This is tomato paste, so we need a couple of 100 grams, which this is a 500 gram jar, and there's about half left. So I'm going to put in almost all of that. I'm going to put in about 3 tablespoons of vinegar. and about 3 of honey. Now you can sweeten with honey, you can sweeten with sugar, you can sweeten with maple syrup or dates, whatever you prefer. I'm also going to add in some coconut aminos, or you could add in soy sauce if you want to. So I'm adding in about a tablespoon, maybe 2. I'm also putting some mustard in my tomato sauce. About a tablespoon. And about a teaspoon of salt. I use the pink Himalayan sea salt, or you could use a Celtic sea salt as well. Whatever mineral salt, I wouldn't recommend using like a table salt or an iodized salt. I'm going to add in half a teaspoon of ginger, about a quarter of a teaspoon of cloves, and half a teaspoon of allspice, a quarter of a teaspoon of chili powder. I like a little kick to my tomato sauce. And I'll just go and grab some cinnamon and a half a teaspoon of cinnamon. And that's it. And then if you're using a food processor, I would just give it a turbo blitz or mix it up for about 5 seconds. And then if you're using a processor, I would then transfer it to a saucepan and then just very gently simmer for half an hour. And then once it's finished simmering, I would transfer it back to your food processor and blend it, or your high-speed blender. So here I've just set my Thermomix for 30 minutes at 110 degrees Celsius, and I'm just going to let that go until that's ready. So I'll just clean down the bench and then get ready to make our seed crackers. And that is our oven. So our chicken for our broth is now done. So I'm going to turn that oven off and get that out. So before we get on to our seed crackers, we're just going to finish off the chicken bone broth, as that will have to simmer for a good, at least, I like to simmer it at least 8 hours, if not 12. You can definitely simmer it for a lot longer than that. And when I say simmer, it's barely a simmer. I have it on the lowest temperature and just keep it going for hours and hours. So we'll get that going and then we can move on to the seed crackers. So in our saucepan, we have the roast chicken and onion and carrots, and any juices that were in the bottom of the pan, I also added them. Basically just tipped the whole roasting tray contents into this stock pot. I'm also going to add some apple cider vinegar to this, as this will help draw out a lot of the minerals that are in the chicken bones. About 4 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. And then next I'm just adding in filtered water. So I ended up adding in 10 litres of filtered water, and I'm also adding in about a tablespoon of peppercorns, as I really like the flavour that the peppercorns give. I'm not adding salt, as when I cook with the chicken broth, I'll be adding salt to the recipes as I cook them, so I don't need to add it in now. So the next step here with the chicken broth was to turn the heat on, bring it to barely a simmer, and then turn the heat all the way down I had mine on for 8 hours, but you can have it on longer and you can also have it on shorter. The longer you leave it on, the richer and deeper the flavour is going to be. Okay, so our milk for our yogurt has now come to temperature. It's 38 degrees, which is perfect for what I want. And I'm just going to add my yogurt, which I'm using as the culture. And I'm just going to whisk that in to mix it up. And then if you're using a yogurt maker, just follow the directions of your yogurt maker. Or if you're using the oven with just the light on, then just mix it up and go ahead and place it in the oven. So for me, I'm just popping it in my yogurt maker. And I'm setting it to a temperature of 38. And I'm putting it on for 24 hours. Now the reason that I'm having such a long ferment on my yogurt is that I am slightly dairy intolerant, and having it set at 24 hours means that all of the lactose in the milk is consumed by the culture or the bacteria that's there, and that means that it's a lot gentler on my digestive system. However, that also makes it quite sour and tart, so which is fine. I can add in some honey or some pureed fruit. That's not a problem. Okay, so the second last thing we are making today is some seed crackers. So these are really easy to make. All I'm going to do is add 225 grams. Helps if I turn the scale on. Hang on. Okay, let's start again. So you definitely need a scale for this. And I'm going to be adding 225 grams of almond meal. And this is just blanched almond meal, not almond flour. And essentially for these seed crackers, we're just adding all of the dry ingredients in, mixing them up, and then adding the wet ingredients, rolling it out and cooking it. So I have preheated my oven to 200 degrees, and as it was already on that to roast the chicken and veg for the broth, that's perfect. So it's already nice and hot and ready to go. The next thing that I'm adding is coconut flour, and we need 60 grams of coconut flour. So I'm just going to tear my scale again and put in 60 grams of coconut flour. Now you need to be accurate with the coconut flour, as coconut flour is highly absorbent, and if you put in too much, you'll definitely need to add a lot more liquid. So that's 60 exactly. The next thing that I'm adding is some flaxseed flour, which has been in the freezer, because flaxseed or linseed flour oxidizes very quickly, so it's best to keep that in the freezer and in a dark spot. So we need 40 grams of the flaxseed meal. And you'll be able to tell if it oxidizes too far, as it'll have a bit of a rancid flavor, like a rancid oil. Perfect, so that's 40 grams. And we need to add whole psyllium husks. And we only need 8 grams of that, so not much. And that adds some great fiber into these crackers. So we've got 8 grams of psyllium. And the next thing that I'm going to add is dried rosemary. And for the dried rosemary, I'm just adding in 1 teaspoon. But you can add garlic and onion powder, you can add chili powder, you can add barbecue seasoning, you can basically add whatever flavorings you like to these crackers. You could even add in some dried fruit if you'd like to, if you want to have dried fruit with the savoury crackers. The combinations are almost endless. And the last thing I'm adding is 4 teaspoons of salt. And again, you can add salt to your preference and your family's preference. And then I'm just going to whisk these dry ingredients together and just try and break up any lumps that are in there. Okay, so I've missed recording adding in the water, the lukewarm water and the olive oil, but all I did was have 190 grams of water and 30 mils of olive oil, and I just combined that in a little jug, and then I've poured it into my dry mix and I've just mixed it up with a spatula, and I added an extra tablespoon, as it can vary from batch to batch how much water you need to add in, and it also varies what brand of coconut flour especially, but also the almond flour, how dry they are as to how much water they'll absorb. And what we were looking for is a dough that's not sticky but that just holds together and isn't too dry and crumbly as well, so that is perfect. I've put my dough out on some baking paper and I'm just going to roll this as thin as I can get it, pretty much. So you're wanting about 1 millimeter. And it's okay if it breaks up a little bit. I just kind of mush it back together and it's good to go. Okay, so once you've got it to about 1 millimeter, I just cut the edges off and square it up a little bit. And we'll just re-roll that extra dough. And then I also flip it over just so it doesn't stick to the paper while cooking. And I'm just going to cut this into rectangles. But you could do any shape you like or any size, triangles or little squares, or if you've got a fancy cracker cutter, you could use that. And I'm just going to cut rectangles today. And then I'm not going to take this off the paper. I'm going to place this straight on the tray, paper and all. And then this cooks in the oven for 5 to 10 minutes on 200. And then I'll turn the oven off and let the crackers dry out in the residual heat. So my tomato sauce is now cooked. All I need to do is blitz it and process it so that it's super smooth. So I'll process that for a minute on the highest speed. Now, if you have done your tomato sauce on the stovetop, it's really important that before you move it to a standard blender, that you let it cool down first. If you don't have a blender or a Thermomix or high-speed blender that can handle the heat, or you can use an immersion blender as well to process it. I don't find that gets it as smooth, whereas the Thermomix or a high-speed blender really does get it nice and smooth. That is our seed crackers done. So that's our crackers, and I'm just going to show you what they should look like before you turn the oven off and let them dry out in the residual heat. Cool. Okay, so the edges have got a little bit dark, but all these ones are absolutely perfect. And then I just turn the oven off and the crackers will dry in that residual heat as the oven is cooling. So now we will blitz up our tomato sauce. Okay, so now that our sauce has processed in the food processor and it's really nice and smooth, I'm happy with the consistency, but it is super hot, so please be careful. I'm actually going to take 2 cups worth out that I'm going to turn into a barbecue type sauce, because yesterday I cooked some pulled pork, the pork shoulder, in the slow cooker, and I'm just going to add this barbecue sauce to the pulled pork. I've got 2 cups of tomato sauce in the bowl that we've just freshly made, and to make my barbecue flavoured sauce, I'm adding in some smoked paprika. Now ideally you would add liquid smoke. I don't have any, so I'm just going to add a teaspoon of smoked paprika. And I'm also going to add a teaspoon of sweet paprika. I'm going to add about half a teaspoon of allspice and just a pinch, about 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper, because it's quite spicy. And I did add already a little bit of chili to the tomato sauce, but I think I will add a little bit more, maybe half a teaspoon, oh, maybe 1/4 of a teaspoon. I love chili and I love the heat, but not everyone in the family likes it that hot. And then I'm just going to mix that together, and that's my barbecue sauce for my pulled pork done. So to finish off the tomato sauce, I'm just going to add it to these preserving bottles. They're about 500, 750 mils, not sure exactly. And because we will consume one of these bottles fairly quickly and the other 2 I'm keeping in the freezer, I'm not worrying about water bathing or anything like that. So we'll just get these in here. And that fits perfectly too. Now, when you're putting these in the freezer, you do want to allow a decent amount of headspace. So I've got about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters of headspace here, just to allow for expansion. And I won't pop that in the freezer until it's completely cool. So I'll pop the lids on these, let them cool, and then put them in the freezer and the fridge. So the last thing that we have to do today is to make the beetroot dip, which is really simple. So we roasted our beetroots off with our chicken frames and veggies, so they're done. And I just grabbed some fennel fronds from the garden, and then I'll add the beetroot and the fennel fronds to the Thermomix, or you could add it to a food processor. You can process those on turbo. Just pulse it for 1 to 2 seconds. You just want the fennel chopped up, or the dill, and the beetroots all chopped as well. So once you've processed your dill or fennel fronds and your beetroot, I'm going to add in some onion powder, just a teaspoon, some cumin, half a teaspoon of cumin. I'm going to add in half a teaspoon of pepper. I love black pepper, but you can adjust it to whatever your preference is. I'm going to add in 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and we'll just try it at the end and see what that tastes like. I'm going to add in 2 teaspoons of mustard, a teaspoon of pomegranate molasses, or maybe 2. We'll add in 2 of those. And 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar. And then 100 grams of sour cream. I just do an approximate, so I reckon that's about 100. And we add about 3 tablespoons of oil, 2 to 3, olive oil. or avocado oil. And then we just put this on the food processor, blend it until it's all nice and smooth, and that's your dip done. Okay, so I'm just going to put the beetroot dip in a bowl. Now, depending on what beetroot varieties you use, you could have a really nice pink coloured dip. Mine's a yellow coloured dip, but it just depends on the beetroots that you use. So I'm just going to try this dip and just make sure that I'm happy with the flavours. That is really good. It's got a really nice tang from the pomegranate molasses and the vinegar, and a really nice subtle flavour from the cumin and the fennel, and the beetroot is just stunning. Really nice and creamy, and will go perfectly with our crackers. We had a really productive day in the kitchen. I've got my yogurt going and that'll be ready tomorrow. I've also have the bone broth simmering still on the stove top. My crackers are cooling in the oven. I have my custard base ready to make ice cream tomorrow. I've got my quick pickled onions, my mayonnaise, my barbecue sauce from my pulled pork, my beetroot dip to go with my crackers, and also 2 bottles of homemade tomato sauce. So it is the next morning now, and I just wanted to show you the chicken bone broth finished and packaged up, ready to go in the freezer. And also I'm just going to put the ice cream in the ice cream maker, put the custard that we made yesterday, the custard base for the ice cream, in the ice cream maker. And it's the perfect day for ice cream today. We've had a fairly cool spring for our area. It's been an average of 18 degrees Celsius, which is about 64 Fahrenheit. And today we have got a 34-degree Celsius day, which is about 93 Fahrenheit. So I think by the end of the day, we'll be definitely wanting some ice cream for dessert, which will be great. And I also wanted to show you where my yogurt's at the moment after 16 hours of fermenting. So this is all of my chicken broth packaged up. So I do prefer to store any kind of food in glass, and I'm making that transition. I do the best I can. So I've used up all of my glass containers, these decor containers. So I've got 3 1-litre ones and 3 750ml ones. And then at the back here, I've just got some Tupperware plastic freezer containers as well. So all up, I've got 4.75 litres of bone broth. So here I'm pouring my mint ice cream custard base into my ice cream maker, and I'm just following the directions, manufacturer's directions for my machine. So whatever ice cream maker you've got, you'll just need to refer to your manufacturer's instructions and set the timer for the specific machine that you have. My machine, I set it for 60 minutes and then pop it in the freezer for at least 4 hours. For my ice cream maker, which is the Cuisinart, I was actually able to pick that up secondhand off Marketplace. That had never been used, but somebody had won it as a prize, and it's got a company logo on the front here. If you don't have an ice cream maker, there are a lot on either Facebook Marketplace, which is where I pick mine up, and you can also pick them up at thrift stores quite cheaply as well. So after 16 and a half hours, this is how thick our yogurt is. So I'm really happy with the colour and the flavour that I was able to get from the chicken broth. And roasting off the chicken frames and vegetables really makes a difference with that flavour. So this is the mayonnaise once it's been in the fridge, and it's a beautiful, creamy, thick texture and absolutely delicious. Okay, so this is what our peppermint ice cream looks like after it's finished and been in the freezer only for about an hour. I also stirred through some brookie crumbs that I had lying in the cupboard, and there you go. So much better than store-bought ice cream. That mint flavour is coming through really, really well. And the addition of the brookie crumbs is they're slightly chewy. They've got that chocolate flavour. It's perfect. You could also add choc chips into this as well, or it would just be really nice as a peppermint ice cream. So unfortunately, this is what my crackers look like, as I accidentally left them in the oven and forgot about them, and then preheated my oven to prepare another meal. And needless to say, I will have to bake a new batch. Thank you so much for joining me today and yesterday and spending your time. I really, really appreciate it. If you liked what you saw, hit the like button, add a comment as well if you'd like to let me know what you like cooking for your prep days. And if you'd like to see more, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.